Welcome to another episode of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged, the podcast that celebrates the journey of career rebels who have overcome challenges, blazed their own paths, and came out of the other side winning. Today, we have Keyuana Rosemond, who's an activist, change agent, and nonprofit professional with over 15 years of experience working to advance racial equality for children and families in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. Her role as Vice President of Equity and Innovation and HealthNet of West Michigan is to oversee communications, community engagement, and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives while designing and implementing the strategies for all areas of work. Her passion for creating inclusive and equitable spaces led to the creation of her consulting firm, Key Strategies and Solutions, which aids organizations in creating innovative solutions, folk approaches to their work, and provide coaching and mentoring to professionals in transition phases of their career. We are going to go through all of your accolades and incredible journey. So we're going to just jump right in. And I want to thank you so much, Keyuana, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, when you and I spoke in preparation earlier this week, we unraveled so many layers to your story. So I kind of want to start it from the beginning. So tell us about your educational journey and some of the learning and experiences you had after graduation.
Yeah. So I come from a family that is very much education focused. So drilled into an early age, my mom was like, you're going to college. Like before, it was a situation where people were like, you could either go to college and work. There was no working. It was, you are going to college. Like that was just how that worked. So my entire life has led up to, going to university and being in that setting, right? So I did everything growing up from like robotics club. I did DAPSEP, which is like an engineering program, and I was really like interested in STEM, and eventually like wanted to do biomedical engineering and all of that. And so when I ended up getting to undergrad, I came in pre-med and did all that. It was a situation where I wasn't like really supported as a Black woman at the school that I was at to be in engineering field. So myself, like a lot of people at that time, like changed their majors to something else because we weren't getting that support, and ended up doing something adjacent to health. So, I was the president of the BSU, like I had a job while I was working, like I was very involved in student life because I've been a person that's been involved in things like, again, extracurricular my entire life as an athlete, doing all those pieces. And then I looked up and realized that I was like graduating with nothing to do afterwards. So I just missed the deadline for the McNair Scholars Program, and just all of these other like post-grad activities. So like my first job out of school was at Best Buy. Like I was working in home office, selling computers. And I was just like, okay, how did I get here? As a person, I'm just like, oh, like I've been doing all these things. I have my hands in these different baskets for years at this point, and then I didn't have a plan, or at least I had a plan that I was unable to execute. So something that we had talked about a little earlier was that I have at different points where I had to make a pivotal decision, I had debilitating anxiety. And so like I fell into a deep depression and wasn't really able to like move forward on some of the things that I wanted to do. So like I had the application, but I missed the deadline. I, was part of this group, but I missed this for something, for like another opportunity. So just at various points, like when like things were like, okay, like, will you or won't you? I was like finding myself being stuck and not being able to make those decisions. So I feel like that led to a lot of things that transpired after that. Like I worked at Best Buy. I couldn't really afford like rent on my own or whatnot. So I didn't have a place to live that was mine for a year and a half. Mm-hmm. So I was like couch surfing for that whole time. So like I just had an apartment and it was like 3 of them that lived together and I lived there. And it's not a proud moment for me because I'm like really independent and somebody who likes to, have their own stuff. But that was really challenging because I think at that point I was making $8 an hour. I was working part-time and I just couldn't afford to do anything really. So I think for me, that was like the jolt that I needed to kind of like explore something else and figure out like what was going on. So it was like a really broke gap year. Like, like just trying to figure it out. So the person I was dating at the time was just like going to grad school after they graduated, and they were like, why don't you just apply for student aid? And I ended up randomly applying for student aid getting it. And then they were like, now you just gotta be accepted to a university. So I ended up just applying for school like that next day, and got admitted as a transfer because that was like after their deadline. And then the rest is history from there. So I entered a dual degree program, and 3 years later, I finished with both of my master's degrees, and I started working in my career.
Well, that was a lot. Like you've had a lot of transition, it looks like, from school to Best Buy to going after your graduate degrees and now or are you still a nonprofit today?
Yeah.
Okay, you're
So
still a nonprofit today.
mhm.
Got it.
Yeah. So I'm in nonprofit, like the public health nonprofit field, but I'm also a consultant as well. So I have my own business where I work with organizations and, universities, corporations, etc. And that was, I mean, even just being like feeling like I could be in that space, after a while, after like having all of these different experiences, was an adjustment, I say, because, working with doctors, working with physicians, they like to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And often, like, they're highly specialized in terms of their knowledge base. So they know a lot about one thing and then almost nothing about anything else. And so it was like getting out of that mindset of like, okay, these are the smart people, these are the experts, and really being, in the space where I'm just like, yeah, I'm an expert too, though, at what I do. And so like we're each bringing our expertise to the space. So like not feeling like I don't belong.
Got you. Well, so I have a question because you tapped on it just a little bit, and Isabel and I talk a lot, when we're talking to our clients and stuff, and they're feeling stuck about destroyers, which are, things in our lives that like create the distraction that keeps us sort of like stuck in a space. And you elaborated a little bit about how the depression and anxiety was really debilitating for you. So can you give some tip or like what did you do to get yourself out of that space and mobilize in order to kind of move to the next stage as far as the anxiety and depression and stuff was concerned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it was really like being intentional about changing my environment. Like at that time, I was around a lot of people who were very negative, who weren't very encouraging, who were just kind of stuck in the same routine space, didn't really want to do anything else. A lot of folks who were actually kind of mean, like really negative. And it was just like a situation where it's just like, why, like, I don't feel good when I'm around you. So I already feel the way that I feel. You're not doing anything to like make this any better. So I was finding like when I was around these folks, like I was feeling worse. And actually like going back to school helped because I was able to be around people who were like all working towards the same goal. When you're in grad school, you're a cohort, and you start getting different experiences, and really like that was the space where I started getting my confidence back. Because, like when you're somebody who's a high achiever and you're just always doing something, you're moving, and then you hit this plateau. And it's just like a standstill. So you're like, okay, where am I? Like, what am I doing with myself? What's going on? And that was really a situation where I was like, okay, I'm around people that are doing these things. At that point, I started working at a residential treatment facility. So already like going into social work, then working in a space where a lot of people are aspiring to be a master's level social worker too, was just really helpful to get me out of there, and then meeting people who were like, putting me in different situations in terms of opportunities. I had one professor that I worked with that I had a fellowship with, and I started doing a lot of like grad research with her. And then I started doing presentations with her, like traveling. So I would do DEI trainings with her when she would get contracted to do them with different nonprofit organizations and councils. So like there was one time we did a training with the area agency in aging, back in Michigan. And it was a situation, I got to go to Lansing, I got to meet all these people, we were talking about end of life care with LGBTQ family members and, couples. And so like, I was on and in, and people were asking a bunch of questions and things. And I just decided like, man, like this is something that I really like. It's something that I'm really interested in. And, people are valuing the expertise that I'm bringing in this space. So I just wanted to do more of that. It became like, like I started leaning into more of what I was passionate about. instead of just feeling like I just needed to achieve so that, for the sake of achieving, and kind of flipping that on his head.
So Brandy and I have been in the financial industry probably for the last 15 or 20 years. So we're kind of blinded a little bit that that's the industry that we're in and we have the experience in. And we know that when we started, and to this day, there isn't many people who look like us in leadership. So in hearing everything that you've talked about and your journey to working in a leadership role in equity and innovation and specifically in this space, how is being a queer Black woman, do they give you a platform? Is it been a challenge to carve your way out into leadership, or are you like fighting your way and you've created your own path?
Yeah, I think all of that, right? Like I bring my whole self to the space, but like no one's gonna give me space to speak. And I think that was the realization that I had was just like, you got to create everything that you're doing. And so that is how I've treated my career this entire time. Like all the things I'm doing right now did not exist before me. So I've always been the person to create something new, to start a different initiative, to find the funding to do what we're doing, and then lead, create, direct, and manage it, right? And so it allows me to have a space where I can trailblaze and carve things out. And it also allows me to have the creativity to make it a space where everybody can belong and be included, because I'm just like, okay, like I'm bringing all of these different perspectives to the space. I want to make sure nothing is left out. I want to make sure nobody is left out. I want to make sure we're paying attention to all these pieces, because I know how important it is to create an environment, to build community where people could just show up and be. And I feel like that had been a challenge for me for a long time, like trying to fit into that space. Being somebody who presents young, being somebody on top of everything else. And then I'm coming here and talking to you about obesity. And I got to know all of these things about, statistics with children and all of this and how the data works and everything. And I'm taking all of these things in, how you're perceiving me with my suit on. I have locks, all of these pieces. And I started to think about that, because like growing up, it was very much like, you can't get a job if your hair is natural. You got to press your hair before you go into interviews. Don't lock your hair, because all of this. And I just got all of these negative messages about how I was supposed to show up, what I was supposed to look like, how I was supposed to be. And it just got really exhausting, to the point where I was just like, okay, day one, I'm wearing a suit to my interview. I'm wearing locks. I had like a polka dot bow tie on. Like I was like, I'm gonna be the most extreme version of who I am throughout this process. And if you're good with that, you're gonna handle everything else I have to bring.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate, I'll say, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I was really fortunate to work with an organization that I was helping to actually build that culture, right? Like I think my first day at work was a bridal shower for 2 women who were getting married, and it wasn't legal yet. Interstate, like they had to go to Illinois to get married. So that was a signal for me to be like, okay, like I can be myself here, but I can also push so that other people can show up and be who they are as well. And so I think that was like very attractive for me. And then also being in a community that was smaller, having the opportunity to just, again, show up and be as bold as I can. And then if you can take this, and if you can handle, again, this at the 100th level, you can get me when I'm at 50. You can get me when I'm 20, and we can make some stuff happen. So I think like it was very important to me from day one to just start that off that way, because I had historically worked at Christian hospitals and Christian organizations, and you got to sign a statement of faith. You got to hide certain things about who you are. You can't talk about certain things at work. And I was just like, I can't live my life like that. Like you spend a lot of time at work during the week. If you can't show up as you, then where are you supposed to be you at? You know what I mean? And so that's like how I approach that situation.
Very relatable. I think that's something that's very common between the Black and brown community is the hair. Because talking to Brandy, I thought it was a me thing and not a we thing. So I used to straighten my hair before every training, public events, holiday part, everything. I would straighten my hair, and then it would be, I go outside, it's frizzy and it gets poofy. And then all my self-esteem is right out the window because it was attached to my hair and how I thought I was being perceived because of my hair, my weight, and all these different things. So It's interesting to hear you say that, because I think that a lot of people in something so minor can relate to, because it's like, it's the little thing that makes them insecure, but you're putting it out there and you're like, this is me, and you're going to appreciate me for who I am. This is
Yeah.
more to me than the suit I'm wearing,
Yeah.
Mhm.
When
even
I
though
started,
I'm
my
sure
hair
it was a
was
really great suit.
yeah, my hair was like a lot shorter too. So I was just like, well, and this is my hair. It's not gonna
Mhm.
change, you know. I might braid it sometimes, but let's see what happens, you know. So
I'm always interested to know, particularly for women of color, because as Isabella, so we work in finance, and that's a very white male dominated industry.
mhm.
You're not going to see a whole lot of people that look like us in executive leadership. But when we have these talks about how we show up, right, in these organizations, I'm always curious to know how much of the insecurity about how people was going to view you and how you show up in your hair and all of that stuff, how much of that was internal and how much of it do you really feel like was impressed upon you? I have an answer for me, but I
Yeah.
want to hear your story.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think it's both. It's a both and, right?
Mhm.
Again, all these messages that I was getting growing up, but then seeing actually me and other Black women going into job interviews, going to interviews for fellowships, etc., dressed to the nines. I'm talking edges laid, buns up, like,
Mhm.
and then homegirl that gets the job got a cardigan sweater on. She didn't iron her pants. Like, and so like it became like a little joke between us. It's like, okay, cardigan sweaters, I guess, are a thing, you know, but just feeling like we gotta take the extra mile, you know what I mean? And seeing that, you get indoctrinated into doing that. So it's not even just like, okay, this is internal. You're actually seeing it happen real time. So you're like, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to, you know, get to where I want to go? And that's what I said. I think, like, again, with the whole suit thing, I've been wearing suits for my entire life. So it was just like, okay, well, suits are my aesthetic. Like, that's my thing. We're gonna do that. This is my hair. This is what we're gonna do. You know what I mean? So that just became like part of like how I showed up. And I started to be known as like, oh, she's got cool bow ties. And so like it started to become like my thing when I was showing up. But yeah, like I definitely think it's a both and, because
Yeah.
like that's frustrating and it can be very discouraging when you're prepared, you know what you're doing, you're confident, you have the skill set and the experience, and then you're just seeing this happen day in and day out. Or it's cardigan sweater polo shirt. That's what I see. With the khakis. And it's like, okay, I thought we were supposed to try a little bit more. I thought we were supposed to,
Yeah.
you know, be polished in this space. So I try to do, especially like when I'm hiring people or interviewing them or whatnot, like I try to be like more broad in terms of, you know, how people show up. Because if it's your first interview or you've never had that experience, that's one thing. But again, like if you make an effort and you try and you show up, whatever that looks like for you, I'm good. You know what I mean? As long as you show up, right? As who you are authentically, you know. So I value that. And I've built into the culture of both of my businesses to do that as well. So I feel like we're trying to get away from like those norms of what we think, what the industry is saying, you know, we've been indoctrinated with, and just, can you do the work? How are you going to do the work? What's your approach? Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about that.
Gotcha.
So how did you determine, you have all of your upbringing, all of your experience, all of the trials and tribulations and learning opportunities that you had, and obviously you didn't come out of college saying you wanted to work for a nonprofit. So how did you decide that that was your career trajectory? And did you take a job and it landed you there, or is that always where your heart was?
Yeah. So nonprofit work, and I say like community engagement, activism work has always been something that's part of my family. My grandma was very prominent in a nonprofit social club in Detroit. They did a lot of fundraisers, donation work. Like I was donating stuffed animals when I was 6 to like different auctions and fundraisers and things. There's a lot of, you know, activists and politicians in my family, community organizers. So that work has always been near and dear to me, in terms of activism and engagement in that way. And I did that all through college. But in terms of the formal traditional nonprofit space, it really was this particular opportunity. So again, I grew up as an athlete. I played all sports, really paid attention to my diet and, nutrition, exercise and lifting weights, all of that. It was an opportunity to marry essentially my love for like fitness and wellness with mental health. So there's like a mental health social work component to that, and training and development and like grant writing and all of that. So being able to run a program where you're working with children, families, communities in health and improving health and wellness was like the marriage there. So like I didn't even know that I was gonna get this job. Like my first position, it was just like, okay, I thought I was gonna be a clinical social worker, therapist, and I've been training for that for a while. So I also have experience working in different mental health institutions and psych hospitals, because I was like studying to take my exam, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do private practice therapy, and I'm gonna have my own clinic and blah blah blah, and we're gonna do all these things. And very quickly, I was just like, you know what? I don't like listening to people problems like that. Like, y'all keep y'all business to yourself. Like, it started getting really exhausting because you were taking a lot of that home with you, especially working with youth. Like that's my soft spot. Like my weakness is like working with youth with like severe trauma issues. Like I can't do it, and like you got to know your limitations and your boundaries. But I was finding that I was taking like too much of that home. And then when I'm in therapy one-on-one with people, I'm not listening. Like I'm getting bored. And I'm just like, you brought this on yourself. Like, why are you here? You know what I'm saying? Like the empathy wasn't there long term. So I was like, okay, this isn't going to work out. I need to do something else. And I found out that I really enjoyed the group work because that's facilitation. It's really healing for a lot of like people of color to hear other people's stories, to be able to relate to that, have that narrative approach. Like we were getting things going in like the women's groups and like some of the substance abuse groups. So I was like, okay, like maybe something I could do groups. And this particular position just happened to be a perfect marriage of everything that I was looking for. Like I could practice my grant writing skills. I could still do groups with the parents and the kids. It's light touch, so I don't have to deal with anybody's severe trauma. We're talking about this one thing. And it was something that I was passionate about, that I still am very passionate about, but it's now more strategic and systemic in terms of that. But something I'm passionate about, that I've been a lifelong proponent of. So it just was a perfect marriage of everything. And I was told after I got hired for that particular position that my social work experience was the reason that they were drawn to me in particular, because they were like, yeah, we know that you'll bring that. And we were working with a lot of families of color, a lot of Black and Latino families. So they were like, yep, like you're from the community. Like we know that they already relate to you. You know how to present things in a way that people can understand. Like, let's rock. We've been rolling ever since.
That's awesome. My father was a lifelong service person in the town that I'm from, and he's a city council now, but he spent a lot of time doing exactly what you're doing. So I know what kind of like stuff people in that position bring home. Like it's a lot, but I have to imagine it's fulfilling for you to know that what you're doing is of service to your community.
Yeah, like when you're working with individual families, like that's one thing. Like you get to see that story real time. But when you aggregate everything and like over the years, like how much impact you've made with the community on the whole and groups of families and in zip codes and everything, like that to me is like where my passion is now, like population stuff. Like how can we improve things for like whole populations and move the needle forward? So yeah, but when you're highly visible in those situations, like you got to watch everything you do because there's always a target on your back. Seriously. People either want to come to you and want you to do stuff all the time, like come speak on this panel, come do this, sit on this board, da da da. And so it's very quickly you can get fatigued from being part of all of the community stuff outside of work. And then too, like again, you're highly visible. So anything you post on social media, the things that you say and do, if you have an argument with somebody or you're in disagreement or you're going back and forth about some pop culture stuff, like people look at you different. Like it was wild. Like I just experienced so much stuff. I was in an extracurricular, but I was in like a group where we were working with campaigns. It was a political action committee or PAC. We were raising money and stuff. The police department was surveilling my Facebook account. Like it was a lot. So I'm just like,
Wow.
okay, so no, thank you. But
Mm-hmm.
that was a whole thing.
In speaking about homelessness, depression, the beginning and the end, we usually like ending the episodes with, if you can talk to your younger self or that girl that was going through all of the things that you were going through and struggling and overcoming, and where you are today, what advice would you give that person who may be you 10 years ago?
Don't let anybody try to coerce you to leave any part of your identity at the door. Like whoever you are, bring the whole of you through that threshold and bust through that. Because like there's certain situations where folks were trying to coach me into navigating the space as only a woman, or navigating the space as only a Black person, navigating the space as somebody who's LGBTQ, like, right, like segmenting pieces of yourself, but like you don't, like you betray parts of yourself when you do that, you know what I mean? Instead of like bringing all of those components, because you can't divorce pieces of your experience. Like they call it intersectional for a reason, because they all meet that point. And so it's just like, yeah, like I'm Black, but I'm also a woman and I experience life differently than Black men do for that reason. So I can't separate this, right? And I'm married to another woman. I identify in this way, I present in this way, like that also alters my experience from yours, Brandy. So it's just like, you have to, you know what I mean? And so that's my thing. It's just like, don't leave any parts of you at the door. Like pick them all up and take them with you, because
I
like
love that.
anytime anything is left behind, like again, you betray yourself at the end of the day. And like, you gotta trust you. You gotta show up for you. So that's what I would tell her. And that's what I would tell anybody else.
Yeah,
That's
with
awesome.
Brandy. That was incredible
Mm-hmm.
advice. I think that I could have heard at a lot of different points in my life.
Well, so we want to make sure that everybody who wants and needs to get in contact with you can follow you and find you. So we didn't get a whole lot into your consulting firm. So if you want to give your consulting firm a shout out and how people can reach you and all that good stuff, all your Instagram handles, Facebook, whatever you got, give it to the misfits.
Yeah, so I do a lot of cultural commentating on Facebook, so you can, go look at what I got going on there. But you can also find me at my name, Keyuana Rosemond, on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posting about my professional blog and my business on there. My website is keystrategiesandsolutions.com. So you can go on there and, you can find the blog. You can also see what services we offer. Right now, we're doing a lot of help with kind of doing organizational and change management with new nonprofits, nonprofits with executive directors of color that are new to the position and just don't know what to do. Do a lot of consulting and leadership development with them. If you're an organization or corporation that's looking at your DEI strategy or you don't have one and you need somebody to kind of come in and do an organizational audit and kind of go through those pieces, Key Strategies and Solutions is your thought partner in that space. So go on and look. Again, the blog is taking off. That's really wanting to take like a lot of the professional situations that I've been in and a lot of the nuggets that I've learned and turning them into keys, right? So that's my thing. Like turning them into keys. So, you can go on and get some keys to success, get some major keys for your life. And you can hit me up there. And then on Instagram, I'm Royal Mastermind, RHO. Shout out to my sorors, the Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Yeah, 1920. So RHO, Royal Mastermind, and you can connect with me directly. That's like my little personal blog. So when we do our traveling and things, posting stories, pictures, and things that we do when we leave the country. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Keyuana. We really appreciate your time and all of your words of wisdom to our career rebels. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.